Hey y'all, I'm Emily,
And I'm Christiana.
and we are teaming up to offer you a brand new program for parents, educators, caregivers, therapists, anyone caring for children on the front lines. We want to tell you a little bit about ourselves today and how we came together.
Awesome. And I love it because we're on the cutting edge of science and therapy. And what you and I are trying to do is implement change for the systems of how we grow our children up. We are integrating psychoeducation, neuroscience of the developing brain, and energetic healing modalities that are somatic based therapies. So ultimately, what that means is we want to teach folks on the front lines with kids how to build body mind connections that will foster coherent narratives and raise healthy kids who can be regulated in their bodies, minds, and spirit.
Yes, let's jump into our bios. Will you start us off, Christiana? Tell us about yourself.
Well, really, it's all linked up with how you and I met because
Yeah.
I was continuing my education and adding in one of the last pieces, which was the inner child journey with our colleague Robin Grill, who is a therapist and counselor and wrote the book Parenting for a Peaceful World, as well as Inner Child Journeys. So you and I like really clicked because of our ideas and how we think that change can be made, and it can be made with all of this new science that's out there and incorporating it with the energetic world, like the somatic based world. So you and I are like coming together in an interface between different backgrounds. And my background is all about energetics. Like I'm a craniosacral therapist and a prenatal and perinatal somatic psychology therapist. So it's interesting. I use these two interfaces to basically help people feel into their bodies, or what some people call somatic experiencing. And the reason why I got into all of this is my background with my kids. Like when I had my kids, I had a C-section, two, and I wasn't prepared for either one. And what happened with my children from the birth on, and truly, I wasn't getting answers, and coupled with my stress, because this is a lot about why we're here today, is that we're offering this class coming up to help people manage stress and understand how our past becomes our present time. And that's really what happened with my pregnancies. It was much more than having a C-section. It was my past and my story from my childhood that really set me up for the stress that I encountered once I had two kids. And it's interesting because I wanted more answers because I was also having pain and suffering myself. And when my daughter was 4 years of age, we had already run the gauntlet of like colic, ear infections, wild temper tantrums, erratic mood swings, coupled with um, my ability that I couldn't manage, and I didn't have any answers, and I couldn't help her or be the parent that I wanted to be. I was like, what is going on? And when I would interface with a doctor or a pediatrician, I would just get, there's nothing wrong with your child. But something inside of me was like, no, this isn't right. This is something is severely wrong,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't be this hard.
Right.
It shouldn't be this hard. So that's basically, once I had my second child, I had already had a spinal injury. What I mentioned, like when my daughter was 4, I basically had a breakdown and had 4 slip discs in my spine, and was going to have a back operation, but happened to find an acupuncturist. And her daughter was a craniosacral therapist, and they ran a clinic in Falls Church, Virginia, Heavenly Bodies. And these women really, they took me in and they healed me, like body, mind, and soul. It wasn't just a physical. I basically had a whole awakening. I decided I wanted to go study cranial sacral therapy and be like this woman who helped me and helped my daughter. And I did. And then I ended up meeting a couple of other very profound mentors, Kate White, who She taught me prenatal and perinatal somatic psychology and how to use this in a therapeutic setting. And I specialize like with women who in the birthing world are recovering from birth and are having problems with their babies, just like I did. In addition to children, toddlers and young adolescents. But it's really something it's profound. I haven't had any kind of therapy like this before, and I had been through lots of therapy. And this was something that changed not only myself, it rewired my entire nervous system. And what we're going to teach in this class are tools that anybody can use. Like you don't have to go to years of schooling like I did. And not only that, but it was something that I could use and apply in my family life every day. So that's a little bit about me and how I came. And what about you?
Yeah. Well, I'm Emily. I'm the founder of Rebel Shift Childhood Coaching and Consulting. I am a mother and a longtime educator, teacher, and a certified parent coach and an inner child journeys practitioner. I'm also a progressive educator. I work also with trans and gender nonconforming youth. I'm a speaker and an emotional interpreter and a fierce advocate for children's rights. I've been working with kids and families for more than 20 years. I founded a small school here in Southern Arizona in 2010 and ran it for 10 years. It was called Downtown Community School, a school for children. It was also a progressive learning environment where I would run classes for adults and educators. And it really became my laboratory because I was doing the new stuff with these kids for a decade. I learned a lot in that process. So my main purpose really is to interpret children's needs and feelings. That also applies to the inner work that we do with adults, and to empower children and adults alike to find our true, authentic voices and be able to share them with community. I specialize in kids with high needs, behavioral differences, sensitivities, or troubling and disruptive behaviors in children with diagnosis, especially in those early years. But I work with the full range of ages and stages. And my work is dedicated to honoring self-expression and providing support and this inclusive, cutting-edge conversation that you've already started to talk about, which is why we, I think, bonded and connected, because we've been functioning in our own little orbits with a similar conversation for a while. So it's really exciting. So neurologically sound approach that creates emotional safety and sustainability within relationships. I really help adults decipher and decode what's going on beneath the surface of those troubling behaviors I mentioned. So starting a school was deeply personal for me because growing up, I was a wild child. What does that mean, really? Opinionated, outspoken, creative and intuitive, but really misunderstood. And by the time I got to junior high school, my bad moods and impulsive behaviors kind of ruled my daily life. I was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD and a learning disability when I was in 8th grade, then started my medication regime for several years, which only increased my rage and led to a bit of a drug habit during those years. By the time I was 16, I ran away and dropped out of school. The adults in my life, so caregivers and therapists, focused on how I made bad choices, and I needed to learn how to make better choices. I needed to learn how to focus and simply calm down. That remedy was not a remedy for me. So I continued to resist. And from everybody's perspective, I was kind of an impossible problem. I spiraled out of control for many years and received even more serious diagnoses by the time I was around 19 and 20. So somehow through all of that, I remained curious and really wanted to know what was wrong with me. right? Why was I having all this trouble that seemed so isolated from the group? That's how it felt. Um, so I started digging into psychology and a variety of different healing modalities for myself. And I found neuroscience, not until I was in my early 30s, honestly. So about 10 years ago. And this conversation about trauma, this trauma informed conversation. Those two things, the neuroscience and the trauma informed conversation, filled in all the holes. It just completely changed my perspective, and it was so grounding because everything started to make more sense. And the scope of my healing changed the way that I saw the world and the way that I then could help. And some of it had been intuitive, right? But it made more sense. It just filled it in. So in the big shift there was what's wrong with you to what happened to you, right? To make these behaviors show up in your life, which is it's a huge change there. I learned personally that I had been masking and overwhelmed, dysregulated for decades. I learned how to cover it pretty well. I have acting in my background, and that was supported in my childhood. I learned how to be really performative. But underneath it, I was kind of buzzing and stressed all the time. So that's really the focus of my work at this point, right? I believe that we kind of have to go through it before we can really offer sustainable tools to others. And I'm not done. It's an ongoing process. I'm still very much on my healing journey. I can't imagine arriving inside of that. It'll be the continuation of my life into old age. So yeah, and I'm really interested in deciphering and decoding the maladaptive strategies that come out of stress for kids and adults. So yeah, I'm also a mom of two kids. I have an 18-year-old and an almost 13-year-old.
Wow. And another one. I just really hear this rebel phase, or this brush up against authority, and hearing this profound shift that you discovered when you heard not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Because you and that's another reason why we click so much.
Yeah.
Because I was a troublemaker. I was always doing very well in school and lots of extracurricular activities, but I was falling apart on the inside. And my behaviors and the drugs and the alcohol and the attachments, right? The relationships that I had, everything was driven by my nervous system being like in this complete, almost like a frenzy. It never rested, which is of course why I got to that point in my life where I crashed, because I had another person who was relying on my nervous system now
right.
that I was taking care of.
Right.
And my nervous system was a wreck. And I didn't understand why hers was a wreck. And I was like, oh, wait, now it's time to like really like turn in and look inside and look behind. Like, what did I come from and where do I want to go? Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about all of this, is because everybody brings a unique story.
Right.
And they all have innate gifts and talents. And the health is always there. Mm-hmm. It's always there. It's managing actually all the pain and managing
and digging in, right? Digging in to see beneath, which can feel really overwhelming and scary for people. And I think that, that's a big part of what we're talking about, is being the guide for folks too, to hold people's hands through
be the support.
That journey. Yeah.
To help them in that support where let's face it, this is why we're here. And the systems that we want to change is because there's not enough support, and there hasn't been intrinsically in our societal framework, not enough layers of support.
That's right.
Generationally. Yeah. So this is why I'm so glad that we came together and we were able to explain to people who are listening and people who will listen in the future who we are, why we came together, and really how this is is new, like integrating these types of therapies and modalities and, ways of thinking and bundling them up all into one and packaging it in a layman's terms. So we're not like talking over people's heads. We're like on the ground in the front lines, like talking the language, because you and I have been there. We're in it. We're here every day.